You don't die, you just upload. The NDE quantum connection, the upload no one admit. You don't die, you upload. During near-death experiences, people report structured hyperreal events while the brain is barely online. Medicine says hallucination. Physics points at information and interfaces. In this episode, I'll show you the flatline glitch, the cosmic data stream, the energy ledger, and why the light behaves like an access layer. There's one missing step that makes the whole thing click, and it isn't mysticism. First, the flatline glitch, when the brain goes quiet and the data surge begins, and why the hallucination story breaks on timing, structure, and what gets remembered. The flatline glitch, hyperrealities, and the hallucination failure. Here's the stakes. In operating rooms and emergency wards, some patients hit clinical death markers. No effective heartbeat, no measurable breathing, EEGs that fade or flatten, then come back describing events that feel more real than waking life. Not fragments, but coherent sequences. Panoramic perception, dense life reviews, encounters that act intelligent, and a boundary with a choice. Some recount procedural details they weren't supposed to access. If the brain is the whole story, why is the experience organized? And why do some details line up with the environment? The standard answer sounds tidy. Anoxia, CO2 neurotransmitter storms. A stressed brain can hallucinate, true, but timing ruins the fit. Anoxia models predict degraded ordering, fractured imagery, and content reflecting random activation. Many NDEs present tight arcs, decision points, and recall that stays stable for decades. The thing most people miss. Hallucinations decay under scrutiny. These memories sharpen around structure. Life review, panoramic access, relational audit, a boundary, and return. It's not vibes. It's information architecture under stress. Let's raise the rigor. Doing this wrong makes us credulous. Doing it right forces a better model of consciousness. The mismatch is about information structure and timing. When exactly could an oxygen-starved cortex synthesize a crisp, cross-checked narrative? And why would the motif set be conserved across cultures while the costumes change? Here's the refrain. Consciousness is information processing embedded in larger correlation networks. Your brain is a write-heavy device, constantly broadcasting traces into the world, photons off your face, words in other minds, artifacts you create. In normal life, the self-model gates bandwidth. You experience a narrow stream. Under crisis, gating fails. The system stops writing fine-grained detail and briefly can access summaries tied to redundant correlations you've already broadcast. Hyperreal doesn't mean higher resolution. It means higher compression, delivered fast. So what are the anchors? The life review looks like accelerated indexing of high-signal events, the ones redundantly recorded across people and media. The tunnel and light feel like a jump from noisy local detail to a unified high-bandwidth summary, the way an interface would present state when write access fails. Panoramic perception reads like a switch from egocentric coordinates to a broader correlation graph. Entities. Often they function as retrieval patterns, permissions and context, rather than physics-breaking beings. That decodes structure without dismissing meaning. Let me show you how this presents. A patient flatlines. CPR begins. Clinically, minutes pass with little organized cortical activity. After resuscitation, the patient describes a missing crash cart attachment, a specific line a nurse said, and a defibrillator tone stepping twice before a third shock. They also recount a sequence. Separation, a surge into clarity, a review framed by how their choices affected others, then a boundary and a decision to return. Notes later confirm the attachment scramble, the phrasing, the shock sequence. This doesn't prove mind outside brain. It pressure tests hallucination with timing and structure. Random noise rarely yields low salience procedural hits alongside cohesive moral audits. Why would crisis improve coherence? Bandwidth. Memory is correlations, not snapshots. You don't store your life only in neurons. You store it redundantly by changing other systems. Crisis halts high-frequency writes and prioritizes a compressed, redundancy-weighted summary. That feels more real because it's distilled signal, not sensory clutter. It centers consequences because social redundancy stabilizes those correlations. Now here's where most people mess up. They leap from structured experience to neurons are irrelevant. Don't. Treat the brain as an interface tuned for daily tasks that under extreme conditions shifts modes. The self-model relaxes, the accessible correlation graph widens. Cultural overlays and post-event inflation happen. Beneath that, a skeleton repeats. Life review, panoramic access, relational audit, boundary, and choice. Strip the iconography, the compression pattern persists. Common mistakes if you're evaluating accounts. First, don't grant every claim detail. Ask for timing anchors, who else could have known and when. Second, separate emotional intensity from evidential weight. Hyperreal can still be memory under stress. Third, look for conserved structure across cultures when imagery varies. If structure holds while costume changes, you're likely staring at the codec, not the content. A quick win you can use today. When you hear an NDE, listen for the index. Which scenes surface and why? You'll notice they're the ones with the most external witnesses or downstream effects, the choices that propagated. That's the redundancy filter selecting what survives into the review. One more piece that makes this intuitive. You've been broadcasting yourself for years. The way you laughed in a kitchen lives in a friend's memory. That late-night email lives on servers. A process you introduced keeps running on Tuesdays. When your local right fades, those copies don't vanish. They're what's left. At the edge, presence feels like truth because many independent channels agree. Redundancy sounds like a chorus. Once you see that, the next layer is natural. If reality encodes on edges, maybe the light is less a tunnel and more a high bandwidth access layer, an interface that surfaces the summaries you've already written into the world, weighted by what many channels can confirm. The cosmic data stream, boundaries store the book. If you treat NDEs as private hallucinations, you miss the storage layer. Physics keeps pointing to edges as where information lives. Not poetic edges, physical boundaries that set what can be known and stabilized. If the review feels like a high bandwidth summary, ask the practical question. When local write access fails, where would a system pull a summary from? From places already holding compressed, redundant records tied to you. Start with the holographic hint. In gravity, information scales with area, not volume. Black hole thermodynamics says the number of possible internal states is proportional to the horizon's surface area. That doesn't mean our universe is literally a 2D movie screen. It means boundaries encode constraints powerful enough to reconstruct bulk behavior to the precision any observer can test. If bits scale with area, nature, S telling you where the ledger sits. Translate that to daily life. You've been writing your state into nearby boundaries for years, into other minds through memory, into artifacts through text and images, into your environment through causal traces. Those records aren't in one vault. They're distributed and redundant. When your internal process loses fine-grained control, the only data that remains quickly accessible is what's already stabilized externally. That's why the review centers on consequences, correlations that propagated and were copied. Think in light cone terms. Your personal light cone is your causal instance, everything you've touched and everything that touched you. Inside it, the world saved your state in pieces, videos, notes, habits, and other people's routines, photons that left your face and landed in sensors, where patterns on tools you used. You are not a single database. You're a graph of correlations with dense clusters around relationships and work. Under crisis, the self-model relaxes and indexes that graph by redundancy, cross-checkability, and reach. Here's the shortcut nobody teaches. Panorama logic is compression logic. A panoramic perception feels like everything at once, but it's really the readout of maximally correlated summaries. Who you hurt, who you helped, who copied your choices, where your signal traveled. That readout doesn't require mystical access. It requires boundary access. Edges encode, the bulk follows. Guardrails matter. Holography is robust in theory land, but our universe isn't the clean toy model. Don't overclaim. Use it as a guide. If area bounds information, then any finite horizon, including your local apparent horizons, caps storage and forces compression. Within that cap, redundancy wins because it makes facts objective. Now bring in the energy bill preview. Landauer's principle says erasing 1 bit costs heat. The universe charges for deletion. That means wholesale wiping is expensive and rare. Life writes more than it erases and spreads records across channels. Your diary might burn, but your impact persists as copies in minds and matter. Under duress, a system would query summaries that are cheap to fetch, highly redundant patterns. A life review can feel instantaneous because you're not retrieving every microstate. You're re-indexing the compressed catalog of what's stuck. Let me show you how this looks when you map it. Imagine a network diagram of your last year. Nodes are people and artifacts. Edges are interactions weighted by frequency and emotional salience. Now color edges by redundancy. How many independent channels corroborate each event? The brightest edges dominate a boundary-accessed review. The apology that rewired a relationship, the project that shipped and changed a team's habit, the failure you hid that still leaked consequences. Those edges are easy to fetch because they're everywhere. Most people trip on observer. They hear quantum observer and picture a mind forcing outcomes. Swap that for information flow. The world renders when information about alternatives spreads irreversibly into the environment. Observation is copying. In that sense, the light isn't a hallway, it's an interface, an access layer where redundant records are available in a unified channel. You cross a boundary where local coherence is gone, and you're handed the summary your instance can still address. Personal light cone again. Your instance is just the degrees of freedom you can still couple to. As internal write fades, your readable surface becomes those robust external encodings. Entities may appear because your brain needs a permissions metaphor, a guide, a gatekeeper, a presence that authorizes access to shared records. Underneath the iconography, the function is consistent. Context setting, scope selection, consequence readout. A micro story to anchor it. A student's grandfather's NDE centered on one decision decades earlier, a call not made that cascaded into years of silence. The review didn't replay breakfasts. It focused on that fork because it was the highest redundancy node. Many lives branched, many later stories referenced it. When they mapped who retold the story, how often, and what choices followed, it clicked. Redundancy picked the highlight reel. 2 practical moves. First, when you hear an NDE, listen for redundancy. Which scenes have many independent witnesses or durable artifacts? Those will dominate. Second, if you want different scenes to survive your own review, start encoding them now. Speak publicly, document clearly, teach repeatably, and design behaviors others will copy because they're useful. If boundaries encode and redundancy drives access, then the sharpest context switch is obvious. Death, where decoherence spikes and the environment's records overwhelm the shrinking internal stream. That's where the observer story gets precise without mysticism. Interactions fix bases, horizons gate access, and the interface returns only what the ledger already can't forget. The observer at death, decoherence and the sharpest context switch. Death isn't a fade to black. It's a brutal context switch where the environment takes over your bookkeeping. In daily life, your brain runs a tight loop: sense, predict, act, update, keeping your self-model coherent with rapid writes. At the edge, that loop fractures. Internal coherence collapses and the world's copies of you dominate. Not because a mind collapses a wave, but because information starts flowing outward with no way to pull it back. Let me back up and say it cleanly. Decoherence happens when information about alternatives leaks into the environment. Air molecules, photons, sensors. Each interaction entangles your state with countless degrees of freedom. Interference dies locally because the phases that kept alternatives coherent are smeared into places you can't retrieve. What looks classical is just entanglement growth making recombination practically impossible. At death, that process spikes. Blood flow stalls, metabolism plunges, ion gradients wobble, and synchronized patterns that hold a crisp self-model unwind. Meanwhile, the environment around you is saturated with your records, photos, messages, habits embedded in other people. Decoherence turns those records into the active context. Your dwindling amplitudes don't steer the show anymore. The environment does. Now here's where most people mess up. They picture a ghost hovering, choosing a timeline. That invites mysticism where physics offers mechanics. The better frame. Your brain usually maintains a narrow pointer basis, a set of stable variables like body position, voice, social identity, that the environment redundantly confirms. Under stress, that basis relaxes. The accessible correlation graph widens to include what you've already broadcast. The feeling of panoramic access is your instance surfing redundancy as internal gating fails. Think about redundancy like voters. One neuron whispering can be lost. Billions of photons saying the same thing win. Quantum Darwinism says objectivity emerges when many fragments of the environment carry the same information about a system. At the edge of life, the redundancy you seeded, memories in others, traces in media, physical imprints, outvotes your private state. The observer at death is the environment measuring you from every angle. There's a timing objection. If the brain is offline, how can there be any coherent experience? 2 points. First, offline in clinical language means below detection or disorganized, not metaphysically zero. Transitions are messy. Pockets of residual activity persist. Second, content can be dominated by readouts of already stabilized correlations rather than new writes. Compression reads fast. When synthesis stalls, indexing redundancy is the shortcut. Let me show you exactly how coherence becomes context. Picture your self-model as a stack. Sensations, narrative, social roles, projects, values. In normal life, constant updates glue it together. As the glue thins, top layers, the relational and consequential, are the most redundantly encoded and easiest to fetch externally. That's why reviews lean relational. Fewer durable external records exist for raw sensation than for choices that changed people and systems. Here's the game changer most people miss. The redundancy spike at death isn't only about the past, it locks futures for others. The nurse's notes, the machine's logs, the family's memory, all stabilize facts you can no longer edit. Observation is information flow that becomes practically irreversible when erasing it would cost too much energy and coordination. That's Landauer in plain clothes. Deletion is expensive. Death is cheap on write, costly on erase. And here's what makes it visceral. You've been broadcasting yourself for years without thinking about it. The way you laughed in a kitchen lives in a friend's memory. The 2:07 a.m. email lives on 3 servers. The process you pushed keeps running on Tuesdays. Photos, messages, signatures on forms, dents in a doorframe, a phrase your kid repeats. Those are your echoes, already copied, already out in the world. When your local write fades, those copies don't disappear. They're what's left. And because many independent channels agree, they feel more real than any private thought you never shared. That presence people talk about at the edge isn't a ghost. It's redundancy coming back as truth, a chorus of your own echoes, loud because so many channels align. A micro story. In hospice, a colleague sat with a parent whose last hours weren't about sensations but reconciliations. Calls made, letters written, the one apology still missing. Afterward, what everyone remembered and retold were exactly those moments. Weeks later, photo captions, texts, eulogies replayed that same set. That's Darwinism at human scale. Many channels copying the same bits until they're the only objective story left. So fix the mistake. It's not mind collapses wave. It's interactions fix bases. At the sharpest context switch, horizons gate access and interfaces return what redundancy can guarantee. The review feels instantaneous because it's a compressed, redundancy-weighted synopsis. The clarity feels moral because consequences are the most copied part of your life. The boundary feels final because the environment is still writing while you've lost your pen. What follows from that is practical. If you want different highlights later, encode them now. Speak publicly so copies multiply. Document clearly so copies stay faithful. Teach repeatably so copies self-repair. Design habits others copy because they work. You can't choose the physics, but you can choose what it makes cheap to read when it matters most. The energy ledger, Landauer's principle and immortal data. Let's pin the bill where everyone can see it. Landauer's principle. Erasing one bit of information costs at least kT ln2 of energy as heat. Not a metaphor, a measured lower bound. Translation you can feel. Forgetting on purpose isn't free. Any device that resets memory pays in heat. Any process that permanently clears a record leaves a thermodynamic scar. Now tie that to the edge you'll meet. Decoherence spreads information outward. Quantum Darwinism stabilizes facts by copying them into many channels. Landauer says once those copies exist, undoing them is expensive. The default of the universe isn't deletion, it's persistence as distributed correlations. In photons, in materials, in other people's memories, in logs, in standards, in habits. Death doesn't summon a cosmic shredder, it just stops your local rights. The records you already broadcast don't blink out. They linger because erasing them everywhere would cost more energy and coordination than any realistic process can muster. The thing most people miss is that persistence isn't a perfect archive. It's redundancy at different fidelities. Your voice lives in videos and voice notes. Your choices live in people's routines. Your reasoning lives in documents and code. Your presence lives in photos scattered across phones and servers. To erase you is to reverse changes in thousands of independent stores, impractical at small scales, absurd at large ones. Landauer's bill scales with ambition. The bigger the cleanup, the hotter the burn. Here, that's why this shows up so sharply in a life review. When write access collapses, the only records cheap to read are the high redundancy ones already externalized. Compression meets cost. The interface serves summaries that many channels agree on because those are easy to fetch and hard to dispute. You don't replay every microstate. You stream the consensus, where your signal propagated, who copied it, which consequences stabilized. That's why the clarity feels moral. Consequences survive copying better than sensations do. Let me show you exactly how the bill bites in daily life. Try to delete the fact that you sent a particular letter. Where does that bit live? In the recipient's memory, in the folder on their laptop and its cloud backups, in mail server logs you don't control, in screenshots, prints, forwarded chains, in every downstream decision that referenced it. Each reset requires heat and effort. Each downstream reversion costs work. You can bury traces, but you can't vacuum the world. The ledger keeps a line item somewhere. Bring this back to physics with a caution. Immortal data doesn't mean infinite access or perfect preservation. Devices fail, media rot, people die, horizons fence retrieval. Unitarity says information isn't destroyed globally. It's redistributed or scrambled beyond your wedge. Landauer adds, true erasure is costly, so the practical outcome is persistence with patchy accessibility, durable where redundancy is high, fragile where it's not. Here's the shortcut nobody teaches. You can steer the ledger. Choices that maximize redundancy and error correction travel farther. Speak in public channels. Write plainly so copies remain faithful. Teach so ideas live in many minds. Design checkable processes. Redundancy isn't waste. It's how a finite universe makes truth robust. If you remember nothing else, remember this line. Meaning equals signal that survives the energy ledger. Copied, verified, hard to erase. A micro story to make it concrete. A small lab publishes code with tests, docs, and permissive licensing. Years later, the pie is gone, the original server decommissioned, the team scattered. The package still works because mirrors, forks, courses, and downstream tools keep the bits alive. No one held a central archive job. The redundancy web did the lifting. Try to purge it and you advertise the attempt in heat and gaps. Landauer shows up as tripwires. Now fold this into the edge experience without mysticism. The bandwidth spike of a review is speed from compression. The content bias toward relationships is redundancy. The asymmetry is Landauer, fast to read consensus, slow and costly to erase it. Once many channels stabilize a story, revisions are visible and expensive. That's why people describe the review as final in tone. The copy's already outvoted your private draft. Guardrails. None of this guarantees a continuing subject after death. The model says correlations persist, access and agency do necessarily. It also doesn't sanctify every memory claim. Low redundancy details can be wrong. The safe claim is tight. The universe charges for erasure, rewards redundancy, and stabilizes objective facts by copying. Your durable part is the broadcast you've already made. Practical moves you can take this week. Convert tacit know-how into artifacts with checksums, code with tests, datasets with schemas, decisions with rationale. Teach someone else until they can independently reproduce the result. Place your work in channels that outlive you, repositories, open journals, public standards. Write legibly so future decoders don't waste energy reconstructing your intent. You aren't making content. You're lowering the erasure cost and raising the copy count. One last pass to land it. Landauer is the energy price of forgetting. Death removes the spender, not the bill. The world keeps your receipts wherever you left them, in minds, media, materials. Design your receipts on purpose. Encode the parts you'd be proud to have survive heat, time, and retelling. That's the ethical angle of physics. The ledger is indifferent, but you don't have to be. The light as interface. Horizon, entropy, access. Call the light what it behaves like, an interface. Not a tunnel to elsewhere, but a high bandwidth access layer that returns what your instance can still read when local write access collapses. Interfaces show state, enforce permissions, and summarize what matters. That's the feel people describe: clarity, not detail, context, not trivia, permission, not compulsion. Pin the physics. Horizons aren't walls, they're information boundaries with thermodynamic signatures. A de Sitter, like horizon, carries a Gibbons-Hawking temperature and an entropy proportional to area. Translation: your causal patch has a finite state count and a faint thermal bath. Entropy on the edge is the storage rule. Temperature is the hint that microstates live there. If bits scale with area, you're dealing with quotas and APIs, not corridors and lamps. Why would an interface feel like white light? Because redundancy collapses ambiguity. When many independent channels carry the same story, the fastest readout is a single, unified summary. White because many frequencies have been combined. Bright because the signal to noise is high. Near because the relevant horizon is apparent and local, moving with you as your internal coherence shrinks. The experience reads as certainty because the records are cross-checked by copy count. Keep horizon straight. The event horizon is future-facing. What can ever reach you if you wait forever? The particle horizon is past-facing, the farthest light that has reached you so far. The apparent horizon is local, where outgoing light rays hover at the threshold right now. End-of-life maps to local behavior. Your accessible set narrows as internal write fades, and the interface returns summaries already stabilized inside your wedge. No flight through galaxies required. It's a permissions change at an information boundary. Here, where people misstep. They imagine a global screen everyone sees the same way. But horizons are observer-dependent. Shift motion or context and your apparent horizon shifts. Two observers can access different dashboards without contradiction because causal access prevents cross-checks outside their overlap. That's not mysticism. It's geometry running access control. Bring in bandwidth. A finite horizon entropy means finite recoverable detail. Interfaces under load don't render every metric. They promote effective variables, health, faults, last writes, most impactful transactions. A life review is that dashboard, coarse-grained, redundancy-weighted, consequence-forward. The tunnel isn't a hallway, it's a narrowing of state space as low redundancy branches fall away. The light isn't a lamp, it's the last page your channel can still fetch, crisp because error correction pruned noise. So why the presence of entities? Because permission needs a metaphor your brain can run. A guide, a gatekeeper, a beloved figure, different skins for the same function. Set context, scope access, ask for confirmation, route you back or onward as right access changes. Underneath, the workflow is stable across cultures. Debrief, permission, boundary. The iconography is decoration. The protocol is the codec. Guardrails. None of this requires a central server flipping frames for everyone. Rendering is local stabilization by information flow. Quantum error correction ideas in gravity offer a rhyme. Bulk operators can be reconstructed from multiple boundary regions, but no single observer decodes everything. Complementarity is a sanity check. Different wedges, different reconstructions, no contradictions inside any one access slice. Let me make it practical. If the interface surfaces only what redundancy guarantees, then the clarity people report. I just knew what mattered, tracks physics. You aren't downloading terabytes of microstate. You're reading a compressed index keyed by propagated consequences. It feels peaceful because write pressure is gone. It feels fair because copies don't care how you felt. They care what you stabilized in others. It feels loving when kindness dominated your broadcast and stark when harm did. A micro story to ground it. A friend described the light as total knowing without effort. No pixels, no edge, just the obviousness of impact. The review didn't show awards. It showed the day they taught a colleague a safety check that later prevented an injury. No drama, just weight, like a dashboard tile glowing green where it could have gone red. Different words, same interface logic. Redundancy turned usefulness into truth. Bandwidth also explains the boundary's finality. Once many channels have copied a fact, logs, memories, artifacts, revisions are expensive and visible. Landauer's bill makes erasure hot and coordination heavy. The interface reads as decisive because the ledger is already closed on those lines. You can't edit from inside an instance that lost its pen. 2 takeaways you can use while you still have write access. First, design your dashboard now. If you want a scene to surface later, encode it today in channels that copy well. Public clarity, shared procedures, habits others adopt because they work. Second, reduce ambiguity. Speak plainly, document reasons, teach reproducibly. The interface returns what redundancy can certify. Make the certifiable parts of your life the ones you'd be proud to see lit up. Finally, drop the tunnel myth kindly. No corridor, no secret projector, just horizons acting like interfaces, entropy setting quotas, redundancy picking highlights, and a brain translating permissions into imagery it can navigate. The light is the access layer your world has been building with you all along, quiet, local, and honest. When write access fades, that's what you meet. The shared code, universal NDE patterns as compression. If the light is an interface, the next honest question is why near-death stories rhyme across cultures. Not the costumes, those change, but the workflow. The thing most people miss is that universals don't prove one doctrine, they reveal the codec under bandwidth collapse. When write access fails, every human system falls back to the same efficient readout. Life review, panoramic knowing, a gatekeeping presence, and a boundary with a choice or return. Different iconography, same compression. Let's make the pattern crisp. First, the life review isn't a slideshow. It's an indexing pass that prioritizes high redundancy events, the choices copied into many minds and artifacts. Second, panoramic knowledge isn't omniscience. It's unified access to summaries you already wrote into the environment. Third, entities appear as guides, judges, loved ones, but functionally they manage permission and scope, what you can access, what you may see, whether you can resume write access. Fourth, the boundary takes whatever form your brain can render, a river, door, mist, light. But it enforces the same constraint. Cross it and your local write never restarts. Here's why that map is comforting without being naive. Universals say your experience is grounded in physics-level regularities, redundancy, decoherence, interface logic, not in fragile belief. It means the most important parts aren't private hallucinations. They're the same codec running on different hardware. That's comforting because it turns was my experience real. into, did it follow the conserved structure? If yes, then what you felt plugs into a shared pipeline other people can recognize and test. Real and shared beats private and uncheckable. Think compression artifacts you already know. JPEGs drop high-frequency detail first. Blockiness shows up in the same places regardless of subject. NDEs show the same structural artifacts because the brain under duress runs the same codec. Discard low redundancy noise, surface high redundancy consequences, gate with an entity metaphor, offer a boundary branch. Culture paints the skin, compression writes the bones. Now a falsifiable angle. Strip iconography from cross-cultural corpora and code only for structure. Relational audit, panoramic access, gatekeeping presence, boundary choice, and post-return behavioral shift toward prosocial priorities. Then correlate each scene with redundancy markers. Number of independent witnesses, count of artifacts, social graph depth around the experiencer. Prediction. High redundancy episodes dominate the review, remain stable over decades, and recur in retellings across cultures. If universals ride on compression, they'll survive pre-registered analysis. Here's where people mess up. They use universals to argue either it's all in the brain or one literal heaven. Both overreach. The clean claim is simpler. Finite bandwidth systems under decoherence pressure converge on the same efficient interface. That's why a secular ICU patient and a devout farmer can report the same workflow with different symbols. The protocol is conserved, the paint is. Let me make it human. Why do universals feel good to us? Because they lower isolation. If your most intense moment maps to a shared scheme, you're not alone and you're not crazy. Universals also reduce interpretive load. You don't have to decode every symbol. You can trust the pipeline, index consequences, debrief with permission, face a boundary. That's stabilizing. It lets you integrate the experience without inventing new physics or adopting someone else's creed. A quick story. 2 cases. A software engineer in Tokyo and a grandmother in rural Mexico. One saw a sterile light and a physician-like guide. The other saw ancestors in a courtyard. Both reported the same sequence: relational audit, panoramic knowing, the presence asking if they understood why certain choices mattered, then a boundary with the sense if you cross, you can't go back. Different sets, identical choreography. When researchers coded their reviews by redundancy, public acts, durable artifacts, long-tail consequences, the same moments dominated both narratives. There's a practical lever hiding here. If redundancy drives the highlight reel, you can predict which values get amplified after people return. Not peak sensations, but commitments that propagate, repairing relationships, mentoring, safety, fairness, clarity. That's exactly what long-term follow-ups find. Less interest in status, more in service and honesty. You don't need mysticism to explain that shift. The review taught them the universe's grading rubric. Survival equals copies that help others. Guardrails quickly. Entities aren't fake in this model. They're interface metaphors your brain uses to navigate permission. The presence is as real as a login screen, different skins, same function. Also, compression isn't perfect. Memory inflation and social reinforcement can add decoration later. That's why longitudinal stability matters. Scenes that survive decades likely belong to the codec, not the culture. If you remember nothing else from this section, take this. Universals point to compression, compression points to redundancy, and redundancy points to consequences as the durable part of a life. That chain makes NDEs both testable and meaningful without overclaiming. So what do you do with that knowledge while you're still writing? Encode what you'd want to surface. Turn tacit ethics into procedures. Teach practices others will copy. Speak in channels with long half-lives. Universals aren't there to flatten belief. They're there to focus your broadcast. When the interface returns your synopsis, it will pull from what the world can agree on. Make those agreements the best parts of you. The black hole accountant. No deletion, only recode. If boundaries encode and redundancy makes facts objective, black holes are the savage audit. For decades they looked like shredders. Matter falls in, Hawking radiation dribbles out like featureless heat, and the past gets erased. That was the paradox. If thermal radiation carries no imprint, quantum theory's unitarity breaks. Bits vanish, the ledger dies. Physics kept pushing back, and the verdict is cleaner than people expected. No deletion, only recode. Don Page sharpened the stakes with a simple plot, the Page curve. If evaporation is unitary, the fine-grained entropy of Hawking radiation should rise at first. Early radiation is entangled with the interior, peak halfway, then fall as later quanta carry out the correlations needed to reconstruct what went in. Hawking's early calculation gave a straight climb to the end. That mismatch forced better tools. Enter islands and quantum extremal surfaces. When you compute the radiation's entropy and allow gravitational path integrals to include replica wormholes, a new region, the island, contributes to the radiation's entanglement wedge. Plainly, from the right quantum vantage, part of what you thought was inside is encoded in correlations among the outgoing radiation. The Page curve bends as it should. The account balances. The storage location changes. Holography adds spine. Horizon area counts microstates, an area law, not volume. In add SCFT, bulk gravity is exactly encoded by a boundary quantum system. No single boundary patch holds everything. Overlapping regions can reconstruct bulk operators like a quantum error correcting code. Redundancy without cloning, access without duplication. That's how robust records work everywhere. Many fragments carry the same information about a stable variable, yet no law is broken. Here's where people mess up. They imagine decoding a diary on a weekend laptop. Hayden Preskill sharpened the reality. After the page time, a thrown-in message scrambles fast, on the order of m log m in Planck units, and in principle starts leaking out at the Hawking rate. In practice, you'd need absurd control over quantum degrees of freedom and astronomical computation to retrieve it. Unitarity holds, shortcuts don't. What about firewalls? Monogamy of entanglement says an outgoing mode can't be maximally entangled with both early radiation and an interior partner if the horizon is smooth. Proposed outs lean on state dependence, complementarity, and quantum error correction structure. The shared lesson is observer humility. For a distant decoder with impossible patience, information is in the radiation. For the infaller, the horizon is dull. No single observer verifies both frames. Causal access prevents contradictions. Soft hair proposals add nuance. Subtle conserved charges and asymptotic symmetries can dress the horizon with retrievable data. Gravitational dressing muddies a naive inside-outside split. Everything keeps pointing to surfaces carrying the bookkeeping, with interior showing up as state-dependent reconstruction from what's accessible. Now tie this to the NDE codec without hand-waving. Death isn't a literal black hole, but it is a local horizon you can't recross as an agent. At that boundary, your interior narrative stops writing. Your signal is re-expressed in records already at the edge, memories, artifacts, logs. No deletion, only recode into distributed correlations others can in principle decode. The redundancy weighted life review mirrors Page logic. Early on, your private stream dominates. Near the boundary, the environment's copy wins. Afterward, any recovery is from what the world holds, not a surviving internal cache. A quick human rhyme. People talk about living on in stories, habits, and work. That's not poetic fog in this frame. It's how quantum error correction feels at human scale. Many overlapping coalitions can reconstruct a part of you, a practice, a phrase, a design, from different boundary fragments. No one owns the master. Enough overlap retrieves the function. There's a limit worth stating cleanly. Retrieval isn't free. The global state conserves information, but practical access is brutal. That's the same lesson Hayden Preskill taught at the horizon. Your ledger's lines persist in principle. Decoding them later costs coordination, energy, time, and often new antennas you don't control. That asymmetry is why the interface reads as final. The account is closed from your side, open from the world S. Guardrails for the metaphor. Don't picture a central database writing your soul to a cosmic server. Picture boundary encodings proliferating as copies, people, media, materials, each carrying partial, redundant slices. The inside you propose is a perspective, not a privileged storage locker. When access changes, reconstruction routes change. That's islands in lab math, complementarity in plain speech. 2 practical payoffs. First, encode with error correction. Practices that many can run, documents with rationale, code with tests, values taught as procedures. Those are reconstructible by multiple coalitions. Second, respect access slices. What one group can recover from your broadcast isn't what another can. Design for overlap if you want the important parts to survive. If you remember nothing else from this accountant, take this. Reality hates deletion. It recodes. Horizons hide, they don't erase. Interfaces gate, they don't invent. Your job while you have write access is to make the parts that matter easiest to reconstruct when you're no longer holding the pen. Latency of life, bandwidth, redundancy, and meaning. If reality runs on budgets, your day does too. Light speed caps how fast your choices can spread. Horizons cap how much detail can stabilize. Within those limits, meaning is a vibe. It's signal that survives copying. The thing most people miss is that purpose shows up as redundancy that keeps traveling when you stop pushing. You don't command reality, you join its broadcast. Start with latency. Every action has a round trip time. Close loops are fast and forgiving. Distant loops are slow, lossy, and often too late. That's why coordination stacks in layers. Households, teams, cities, nations. Each layer exists where ping times let feedback land before the system changes state underneath you. Try to steer beyond your latency budget and you create noise, not outcomes. Now bandwidth, channels saturate. You can't write everything everywhere. Smart encoders choose what to send and how to package it. Compression helps. Simple messages with checksums travel farther. That's why clear procedures beat clever slogans. Legibility is an amplifier. People retell what they can repeat without mangling. Here's the shortcut nobody teaches. Impact approximately redundancy times reach times half-life. Redundancy is copy count across independent channels. Reach is how far those channels go inside real horizons, social, technical, geographic. Half-life is how well the message resists decay, error correction, incentives, institutional memory. You can adjust all 3. Design for copying, choose reachable audiences, and build in repair mechanisms so the message self-heals. Once you nail that, agency stops feeling mystical. You're not a lone author. You're a network participant with energy to inject. The job is to place energy where the broadcast representing your values outcompetes noise. Institutions are long horizon encoders. Libraries, standards bodies, journals, open source foundations, schools. They exist to push your signal's half-life beyond your coherence time. If you want your echo to carry, put your work inside systems that keep copying when you're asleep. Let me make it painfully concrete. Before acting on anything that matters, ask 3 questions. Will this stabilize? Who will copy it? How far will it travel? Stabilize means it lands in multiple independent records, policies, code, dashboards, training, not just a chat thread. Copy means people have reasons to repeat it as is, usefulness, clarity, attribution. Travel means there's an existing distribution path. Repositories, syllabi, newsletters, supply chains that can move it faster than you can. A micro story. A city engineer tweaks a pavement spec to improve lane contrast in rain. Boring. That spec gets adopted across municipalities, then folded into a national guideline. Accident rates drop at thousands of intersections. No statue, no speech. The signal persists because its redundancy is institutional, not personal. Now the human twist. Latency forces patience. Some echoes return after you're gone. That's not tragic, it's how large systems answer. Teach a practice to one person a week for a year, and you've created 52 new broadcasters. Give them tests, checklists, and examples, error correction, and the practice survives taste cycles and personnel changes. This is where the NDE lens sharpens priorities. Under pressure, your world summarizes. The scenes that surface are the ones with the most copies in the most durable channels. So design now for that future dashboard. If you want a moment to matter later, make it copy today. Apologize in writing, document the safety margin, publish the method, give credit in public, teach the skill until someone else can teach it without you. People mess up here by confusing intensity with impact. A vivid afternoon fades if it leaves no redundant trace. A dry standard can steer a decade if embedded in tooling and procurement. Your legacy isn't what felt intense, it's what kept getting copied. Practical moves for this week. Convert tacit knowledge into artifacts with checksums, code with tests, datasets with schemas, decisions with rationale and dates. Choose channels with long half-lives. Version-controlled repos, open journals, public standards, archived videos with transcripts. Make it forkable. That invites copies that adapt without losing the core. Add 1 hour of broadcast to your calendar. Not posts, encoding. Write the one-page guide you wish you'd had with an example and an edge case. Publish it where the next person will actually use it. Ask a colleague to run it cold. If they stumble, fix the guide, not them. That's error correction in the wild. There's an ethics baked in. Kindness has high redundancy. People copy how you made them feel into stories that outlast you. Fairness propagates in procedures. Credit propagates in attributions. Courage propagates when it's public and specific. You don't optimize vibes. You optimize behaviors cultures keep because they work. One more micro story. A nurse starts a 30-second pause after failed resuscitation so teams can reset and honor the patient. She writes a one-page protocol, measures burnout shifts and presence at a regional meeting. Within 2 years, the pause is standard at dozens of hospitals. Small bandwidth, big redundancy, long half-life. If she met the interface tomorrow, that's what would surface. Not the hardest shift, the ritual that propagated. If you remember nothing else, take this. Live like a signal engineer. Latency is your focus, bandwidth is your craft, redundancy is your ethics. Your signal is the part of you the universe can keep. Make it copy. Smoothness without pixels, compression hiding the grain. You'd expect a budgeted universe to stutter. If there's a storage quota and an interface, shouldn't we catch the pixel grid somewhere? Dropped frames, jitter, a shimmer at the limit. That instinct is natural and wrong. Where we can actually test, the world stays maddeningly smooth. High-energy gamma rays trek billions of light years and arrive in lockstep across wide energy bands. Precision interferometers hunt for correlated, holographic jitter and keep posting upper bounds. If there's grain, it hides behind symmetries and smart encoding. Here's the move that makes this click. Compression doesn't mean choppy, it means efficient. Keep only the modes that matter for prediction and let symmetries cancel the rest. Area laws for entanglement in ground states already whisper holography, information across a cut scales with boundary, not bulk. Low-energy observers ask low-frequency questions, and the best encoding answers with long wavelength, Lorentz respecting fields. You never paid for every microscopic twitch you can't query. You paid for invariance, conserved currents and smooth fields that many detectors can agree on. Think about a fluid. Molecules crash and jostle, but at our scale you get Euler and Navier, Stokes, not atom by atom chaos. You don't see the grain unless you build an experiment tuned to it. Spacetime can work the same way. Whatever the substrate, spin networks, causal sets, tensor networks, it must course grain to a continuum that hides its guts behind symmetries to absurd precision. That's why gamma ray dispersion tests return null and interferometers stay quiet. The codec cancels naive lattice artifacts and serves you clean invariances instead. So why do NDEs report clarity, not higher resolution pixels? Because efficient encoding reads as smoothness when you're shown summaries. The interface isn't zooming past Planck scales. It's surfacing coarse grained variables with a brutal signal-to-noise ratio, consequences, relationships, redundancy. That feels crisp for the same reason a good edit feels crisp. You're seeing structure without clutter. Clarity is editing, not magnification. Now a common trap. People jump from smoothness to no substrate, as if continuity means nothing underneath. You don't need that leap. Candidate substrates already predict relational discreteness that hides under symmetries, spectra of areas and volumes, partial orders of events, networks whose overlaps reconstruct geometry. The continuum is the emergent language a finite bandwidth world returns to low-energy ears. Smoothness is a feature of smart compression, not proof of infinite resolution. Let me show you how the codec hides grain in practice. Consider a gamma ray burst at redshift 1. If space had a clumsy grid, higher energy photons might trickle in late, energy-dependent delays stacking over billions of light years. Observatories push the bound and keep finding arrivals that lock within microseconds after traveling quadrillions of miles. The viable substrate must respect Lorentz symmetry to painful accuracy. That symmetry is the compression rule that erases telltale dispersion. Now zoom to the lab in your own eyes. Your visual system is a ruthless compressor. You don't render photoreceptor noise. You stabilize edges and objects using prediction and averaging. The world looks continuous because your brain bets on coherent surfaces and wins. Physics plays the same game upstream. Decoherence and environment selection pick pointer states that vary slowly and broadcast redundantly. Those macroscopic variables flood the environment with copies, so those are the ones you and I can agree on. Smoothness is the signature of many witnesses telling the same story. Bring in area laws as a memory device. Picture the universe as overlapping zip files. Boundaries hold checksums and constraints. The bulk decompresses only to the precision any observer can test. Ask a finer-grained question than your channel supports, and the interface returns priors and symmetry-based estimates, not new pixels. That's why holographic noise hasn't shown up at current baselines. The decompressor refuses to instantiate detail no detector can stably fetch. A micro story from the trenches. A collaboration cross correlates two co-located laser interferometers for months, hunting for a correlated shimmer that can't be blamed on local rattles. The winter ends with a flat spectrum and tighter bounds. They publish a null and smile anyway. Each bound is a design spec for viable substrates. Preserve Lorentz invariance, suppress dispersion, hide discreteness under entanglement structure. The absence of flicker is information. Guardrails matter. Don't declare spacetime discrete or continuous from this. The honest line is narrower. Experiments see no energy-dependent delays or correlated jitter within current sensitivity. Black hole thermodynamics, entanglement area laws, and holography keep pointing to boundary bookkeeping. Any microscopic grain, if real, must compress so well that low-energy observers see a continuum. That's a constraint set, not a victory lap. Now tie it back to the interface you'll meet. When people say, the light was total clarity, it lines up with compression logic. The interface is returning redundancy weighted summaries under a finite entropy budget. No flicker because many channels agree. No pixels because symmetry and error correction hide substructure. White because many channels collapsed into a unified readout. Bright because signal dominates noise. Near because the relevant horizon is local and observer dependent. If you remember nothing else here, take this. Smoothness is what smart encoding looks like under constraints. In the sky, it's gamma rays pacing each other and interferometers reporting null jitter. In your life, it's a review that feels crystalline. In both, compression hides the grain and serves the signal. And that raises a final question we've already cracked open. If sparse rules can render a seamless world, who writes the first efficient lines? And how does that same logic render your ordinary day? Inflation's pen, sparse origins, rich consequences. To see why compression can render a seamless cosmos, We need the moment the universe learned to write with almost nothing. Inflation is that move, a brief burst of accelerated expansion that took a tiny, causally connected patch and stretched it to cosmic size. Coordination without cheating light speed, because before the stretch, everything important was neighbors. Start with the horizon problem. The cosmic microwave background is nearly uniform in temperature across the sky, even in directions that look causally disconnected. Without inflation, that uniformity needs a conspiracy. With inflation, it's memory. Those regions equilibrated in a small patch, then were pulled far apart so that their matching temperatures became fossils of an earlier closeness. Flatness follows naturally. Curvature dilutes under rapid expansion. Stretch a wrinkled sheet enough and the wrinkles fade. Inflation doesn't fine-tune curvature, it overwhelms it. That's compression logic. Keep the largest scale mode, near zero curvature, and wash out small bumps you'd never be able to test later at low energy and finite resolution. The quiet masterstroke is seeding structure. Quantum fields don't sit perfectly still, they fluctuate. During inflation, microscopic jitters were stretched to astronomical scales. Modes that started subatomic crossed the horizon, froze into classical-looking perturbations, then re-entered later as the horizon grew back. Gravity amplified those tiny differences into galaxies, clusters, and filaments. Minimal inputs, maximal consequences. You can hear this in the microwave sky's acoustic peaks. The hot plasma before recombination rang like a drum. Some modes were caught at compression, some at rarefaction when photons decoupled. The pattern of peaks in the CMB power spectrum is a fossil sound chart, nearly scale-invariant perturbations with a slight tilt. A handful of numbers, amplitude, tilt, baryon fraction, dark matter density, describe the whole orchestra. That's efficient encoding, few parameters, rich output. Here's the thing most people miss. This isn't hand-wavy patterns in noise. It's a checksum you can audit. Peak positions and heights constrain geometry and matter content. The tilt tells you the slope of the potential that drove inflation. We didn't need a detailed initial map of galaxies. We needed a short instruction list and a faithful decompressor. Expansion, gravity, radiation, chemistry, time. Let me make sparse to rich feel tangible. Imagine writing a melody with just the first few Fourier modes plus a rule to generate harmonics. On playback, you hear a detailed song without storing every wiggle. Inflation did that with space. Set the low-mode spectrum, then let physics elaborate. The universe didn't pre-store spirals and bars. It encoded correlations that made those features inevitable once cooling and collapse had time to work. Honesty clause. Inflation isn't a single model, it's a mechanism class. Different potentials predict slightly different details. Some forecast primordial gravitational waves strong enough to imprint a curl pattern, B modes, in the CMB polarization. Experiments keep chasing and tightening upper limits. So far, no definitive detection, trimming certain scenarios but leaving the scaffolding intact. Low letter 2113 curiosities, the suppressed quadrupole, odd alignments, hover at the edges. They might be statistical flukes or whispers of small features in the potential. They don't bulldoze the acoustic checksum. What about eternal inflation and bubble universes? It's a provocative possibility in some models. Pockets where inflation never ends, budding regions with varied properties. Searches for bubble collision scars haven't found smoking guns. Keep it on the speculative shelf, separate from the hard evidence we actually hold in our instruments. Now connect this to our interface lens. Inflation is the cosmic demo of compression done right. It writes sparse instructions that any observer inside a finite horizon can test. Uniformity without requiring global coordination. Near flat geometry without exquisite tuning. A specific fluctuation spectrum that gravity can scale up. That's why the universe looks smooth without visible pixels. The codec invested in large-scale coherence, then let substructure emerge only where channels could later verify it. This also explains why clarity in an NDE doesn't feel like magnification but like obviousness. The interface returns the biggest modes of your life first, the correlations that predict the most, who affected you, where your signal traveled, and let's find details be context, not the headline. Inflation is the cosmic version. Set the big modes early, let time unpack nuance. A small story from a whiteboard. A theorist circles NS approximately 0.965, the measured spectral index. Not exactly 1, slightly less. That tiny tilt favors long wavelengths enough to match the web we map. One number, vast consequences. You don't need myth to feel awe. You need a system that writes frugally and still renders galaxies. Practical payoff for living inside this script. Sparse beats sprawling when channels are finite. In your work, don't try to press-store every outcome. Set clear, robust rules and parameters, interfaces, safety margins, tests, that let complexity unfold correctly without micromanagement. That's inflation's lesson for teams. Write the big modes so well that downstream elaboration behaves. Guardrails as we move on. Compression isn't denial of detail, it's prioritization under budgets. Inflation one trust because its sparse right keeps paying rent across independent datasets, CMB, baryon acoustic oscillations, lensing, large-scale structure. When new windows surprise us, we spend bits where needed without trashing the checksum. That's the discipline. Add detail when the ledger insists, keep the core clean. And now we can shrink the cosmos back to coffee table scale. The same micro to macro logic that wrote the sky is what renders your day. Decoherence selecting stable variables, redundancy making facts subjective, horizons gating access, and sparse rules letting richness bloom where channels can carry it. Micro meets macro, how the universe renders your day. Take the big rules, decoherence, redundancy, horizons, and shrink them to a Tuesday morning. The universe doesn't swap engines when you pour coffee. It renders your day the same way it renders galaxies. Interactions make facts, copies make them objective, and horizons decide what you can even ask. Start at the smallest useful scale. A mug on your desk is there because the room floods it with witnesses. Photons scatter off glaze. Air molecules pick up heat. Sensors and eyes catch the same story from different angles. That's quantum Darwinism in work clothes. Many fragments of the environment carry the same bits about color and position, so you and your coworker can point to the mug without negotiating a private reality. You're not collapsing it by looking. You're reading copies a noisy world already wrote. Now zoom to a habit. Why does a morning stand-up persist while a brilliant idea from a late-night chat fades? Redundancy. The stand-up lives in calendars, Slack reminders, managers' expectations, and a shared room at 9:30. The idea lives in one brain and an unsent draft. Erasing the stand-up would mean canceling events, retraining people, and removing signage, work, and heat. Forgetting the idea costs nothing. The ledger rewards what's copied. Here's the thing most people miss. Observation isn't a special mental act. It's information flow. When you hit save, speak up, or label a drawer, you're increasing the copy count and making reversal costly. When you leave a decision in a hallway conversation, you're betting against physics. Low redundancy, easy erasure, no witnesses to stabilize the outcome. If you remember nothing else for daily life, remember this: stabilize, then scale. Let me show you exactly how to convert intention into rendered reality. Before acting, do a 3-step pass. 1. Encode. Put the decision where the environment can keep broadcasting it, docs with version history, code with tests, schedules with owners. 2. Route. Choose channels that reach the people who will copy it because it's useful: dashboards, checklists, training. 3. Verify. Ask someone to run it cold and fix what breaks. You just turned amplitude into an objective fact. There's a psychological payoff, and it's not mystical. When life feels chaotic, it's often because your personal rights aren't landing in the environment. You're carrying state in your head while the world around you is broadcasting a different plan. The fix isn't willpower, it's alignment. Move your goals into channels that copy faster than you forget. That's why a trash schedule on the fridge beats remember on Thursday. The fridge is a public ledger with regular readers. Now horizons. You live inside many. Physical light cones, yes, but also access horizons like inboxes you don't have, meetings you weren't in, and communities that don't speak your language. If a fact can't reach you through any channel you actually use, it effectively doesn't exist for you. You expand horizons by adding antennas, subscriptions, teammates, tools, languages. Each antenna widens what can be rendered inside your patch. A micro story. A lab kept losing track of microscope time. People complained, nothing changed. One person added a shared calendar, a QR code on the instrument that opened it, and a 5-minute buffer block enforced by a simple script. Within a week, fights vanished. Decoherence didn't care about intent, it cared about copies. The calendar became the pointer state the room kept reconfirming. Now here's where most people mess up. They try to brute force outcomes with private effort instead of changing the environment. You can grind for a while, but the moment you stop writing, the old redundant pattern reasserts itself. The sustainable move is to make the desired behavior the easiest one to copy. Default templates, pre-filled fields, a checklist that pops up at the exact moment someone would forget. You're not nagging, you're engineering redundancy to outvote chaos. Let's talk identity in this frame. Who you are during the day is the intersection of the records you keep updating and the records others keep reading. Titles, habits, jokes, kindnesses, they're all broadcasts people use to predict you. If you want to change, publish different records repeatedly in places that matter. Don't announce a new you, create a new redundancy field. I'm on time now isn't a declaration. It's 6 weeks of punctual arrivals plus a calendar that stopped drifting. Bring back the life review lens for a minute. What will surface later are the parts of your day that propagated, the apology you finally made, the safety check you taught, the fix you documented so others could ship in half the time. That's not a moral overlay. It's storage logic. Sensations pass. Consequences stick because the world keeps retelling them. Practical weekly cadence. Reserve 1 broadcast hour, not for posts, for encoding. Translate a tacit fix into a 1-page guide with an example and an edge case. Put it where the next person will actually look. Add a short rationale so future you remembers why. Ask someone to try it, patch what fails. Over months, this hour becomes a gravity well. People orbit because your artifacts reduce their entropy. Finally, humility. You won't render everything. Latency and bandwidth are real. Some loops are too slow to close this week. That's fine. Stack small, redundant wins in reachable horizons. Teach, document, instrument, and align defaults. Your day will start looking crisp, not because the universe got kinder, but because you stopped fighting its rules and started writing with them. The final upload. What stays, what fades. Let's make this brutally practical. In this frame, you aren't a hidden substance. You're a web of correlations spread across brain, body, people, media, and matter, patterns that point to the same story. Death doesn't vaporize the web, it lifts the local right head. The records remain where they already stabilized. Think in 3 buckets. First, private microstates, raw sensations, unshared thoughts, fleeting impressions that never earned witnesses. Those fade fastest because they never got copied. Second, shared but fragile traces. A text thread on one phone, a single drive, a memory in one mind. Those linger until hardware fails or the storyteller stops retelling. Third, robust records. Many minds, many media, repeated exposures, institutional scaffolding. Those stabilize, not perfectly but stubbornly, because deletion everywhere is costly and rare. Now say it plainly without romance. Physics doesn't delete globally. It redistributes and hides behind horizons. Locally, access is bounded. After death, the recoverable you lives in what others can, in principle, decode from the environment you already imprinted, memories, materials, and downstream choices triggered by your choices. The rest isn't annihilated. It's scrambled beyond your former reach. So what actually persists in human terms? Memory is the first spine. Other people's recall isn't just storage, it's a re-encoder. Every retelling repairs and recopies the pattern. A story a grandmother repeats at holidays becomes a family pointer state, spoken, photographed, then lived as habits. That's error correction by community. Artifacts are the second spine. Code with tests and forks, papers mirrored and cited, music with open licenses and playlists, designs frozen into standards and tools, policies with version histories and audit trails. These aren't trophies, they're transmission lines. The signal survives because systems keep copying it for their own reasons. Environmental traces are quieter but everywhere. The wear on a bench you built, a tree shading a route that changed a neighbor's walk, a thermostat schedule that nudged energy habits. No single trace is faithful, but the ensemble applies pressure on behavior. Low-fidelity, high-reaching codings can still steer. What fades? Uncopied insight, unsent gratitude, unspoken apologies, work hoarded behind disappearing accounts. The universe isn't cruel, it's honest. Low redundancy is short half-life. Hope isn't a storage strategy, broadcast is. Let me show you exactly how to steer this while your pen still works. Take a decision you're proud of. Where does it live? If the answer is in my head in one email, it's fragile. Wrap it in redundancy. Document the reasoning. Link it to a public artifact. Teach it to a colleague. Encode it in a checklist. Put it in a place with incentives to keep it current. You just converted a private amplitude into an objective fact with a longer half-life. Now the ethical weight that lands hard. A review won't grade intensity. It will surface propagation. The scenes that return are the ones with copies, safety you taught, harm you repaired, clarity you shared, fairness you codified. If you remember one line, take this. Legacy equals clarity times redundancy times kindness. Clarity so copies don't distort. Redundancy so copies don't disappear. Kindness so copies deserve to survive. There's humility in the ledger. Persistence isn't permanence. Institutions fail, formats rot, languages drift, horizons fence retrieval. Some records will slip sub-threshold. That's not failure, it's entropy doing its job. Your goal isn't immortality. It's to maximize the probability that the parts of you that help others stay accessible at useful fidelity for as long as channels will carry them. Open questions belong on the table. Could non-ordinary access to the correlation graph exist? Moments that read beyond standard channels. Some NDE claims hint at unusual hits. The sober stance is testability. Pre-register protocols, separate low redundancy confabulation from high redundancy details, and let independent teams cross-check. If extraordinary access is real, it'll cash out as reproducible information gain, not vibes. A micro story to anchor stakes. A researcher dies mid-project on a multi-year open dataset. They insisted on public schemas, validation scripts, governance, and mirrors. After they're gone, quality rises because dozens of contributors can read, verify, and extend the work. The person fades, the protocol persists. Their final upload isn't mystic. It's a living standard their choices stabilized. Here's the asymmetry that makes the edge feel absolute. You stop writing. The environment keeps writing about you. Logs close in one place and thicken in others. The final upload isn't a beam to elsewhere. It's a handoff you prepared, willingly or not, by how you broadcast while alive. That handoff is why reviews feel decisive. The ledger shows you the parts already beyond your edit. So what stays? Redundant, useful, cross-checked patterns other agents keep copying because those patterns serve their goals. What fades? Low redundancy detail, private amplitude, and stories no channel chose to carry. Your agency today is to move what matters from the second list to the first. Let this land close. The people you've helped already carry you. The processes you made safer already outlive you. The sentence you finally said, the apology, the credit, the boundary, already echoes in rooms you won't enter. You don't die. You decohere into the records you planted and the echoes they launch. The signal joins the boundary chorus. Write it so it helps. What looks like a glitch, constraints not cover-ups. By now, the rendering glitch story is tempting. A galaxy that looks too mature too early, a cavernous void, a stubborn cold patch on the microwave sky each feels like a peek behind the curtain. but the sky rewards discipline over drama. What looks like a glitch usually turns out to be a constraint doing its job. Start with the JWST too big, too soon wave. Early photometry flagged bright candidates at aggressive redshifts. Headlines yelled crisis. Then spectra arrived, lens models improved, and templates caught dust and nebular lines that had skewed masses. Some objects stayed hefty, many stepped down. The frame didn't shatter, our summary got finer. That's how compression adjusts. Spend more bits where physics demands detail. Keep the ledger balanced everywhere else. Voids carry the same lesson. The Boötes void looks like a forgotten texture pack. But run simulations seeded by inflation spectrum and you'll find rare, giant hollows at the tails. Rare has a number. If survey volume and statistics match, emptiness isn't under rendering, it's gravity evacuating low information interiors. That's smart compression. Spend bits on filaments and nodes where gradients live. Keep the middle smooth. Now the CMB cold spot. Big, cool, and lonely. A supervoid along the line of sight can imprint a dip via the integrated Sachs-Wolf effect. Surveys found an extended underdensity there, but probably not enough for the whole signal. It might be a statistical fluke in a Gaussian field, or a small primordial feature. The honest stance is agnostic until blind analyses converge. Either way, a constraint story beats a cover story. If the spot is real beyond chance, tweak the pen. Don't burn the book. Here's the pattern. Light speed fences requests. Horizons cap storage. Holographic hints push bookkeeping to boundaries. Landauer charges for erasure. Decoherence kills unkept alternatives. Each glitch ends up as another place those rules bite. What feels like missing pixels is smoothing where no observer can ask finer questions. What feels like lag is latency, signals still in transit or forever out of reach. Don't do what I did early on. Go anomaly hunting to flatter a pet narrative. That's how you train yourself to love noise. A null dispersion result for gamma ray bursts. Boring only if you miss what it rules out. Crude spacetime lattices that would smear arrivals. Interferometers posting tighter bounds on holographic noise. That's the codec telling you it respects Lorentz symmetry to painful precision. Every non-detection is a constraint the universe signed in public. Let me turn that into a method you can actually use. When you see a head-turning claim, impossible galaxy, void breaks lambdictum, simulation proof, ask 4 questions. What's the prior? Which systematics can mimic it? What's the smallest constraint-respecting tweak that absorbs it? What's one new prediction another instrument can check? If those answers are vague, you're reading a mood piece, not a measurement. A micro story. A team reported energy-dependent delays in photons from a distant burst, the exact signature some discrete models hoped for. 2 months later, they folded in instrument response and intrinsic source lags. The effect evaporated. They published the reanalysis anyway. That's the culture you want. Constraints before clout, corrections before victory laps. NDEs deserve the same filter. A dramatic icon doesn't validate a theology. A crisp structural motif across cultures doesn't reduce everything to neurons. Structure maps to compression. Costume maps to culture. The testable edge is predicting which moments appear in reviews based on redundancy, and then checking across cohorts with pre-registration. If universals ride compression, they'll persist under that pressure. Here's the ethical stake. Trust is finite. Oversell anomalies and you numb people to real cracks. Undersell constraints and you starve good ideas of scaffolding. The better path is sharper questions. How little do we need to add to relieve tension? Which single knob, feedback efficiency, lensing bias, dust law, moves the data inside the ledger without wrecking the CMB peaks, bow scale, or abundances? If you remember nothing else, hold this. Constraints are compasses, not cages. They point to where better questions live and protect you from seductive myths. Use them like the cosmos does. Budget detail where it pays, compress where it doesn't, and let redundancy decide what becomes objective. And here's the quiet relief underneath. You don't need a glitch to justify all. A world that keeps its books, hides grain behind symmetries, and stabilizes truth by copying has wonder baked in. Your move is personal. Translate constraints into agency. Ask fewer, better questions. Design cleaner signals. Choose actions that keep paying rent as the data rolls in. Life's next move. Widen your horizon, maximize signal. All right, let's cash all of this out where you live. Your calendar, your team, your family, your next decision. In a world that budgets storage, charges for erasure, and stabilizes truth by redundancy, your smartest move is simple and repeatable. Widen your horizon and maximize your signal. Not louder, clearer. Not everywhere, where copies will survive you. Start with horizons you can actually move. Physical horizons widen with tools, sensors, travel, networks. Social horizons widen with people, teams, languages, communities. Cognitive horizons widen with models, statistics, version control, causal diagrams. So you stop guessing and start asking measurable questions. Every new antenna you add increases the slice of reality that can stabilize inside your patch. More channels, more places where your choices can become objective facts, because the environment will copy them for you. Now translate that into a weekly protocol. Before any important action, ask 3 questions out loud. 1. Will this stabilize? 2. Who will copy it? 3. How far will it travel? If the stabilization path is a single message in a chat, fix that. If the copy path relies on goodwill instead of usefulness, fix that. If travel depends on you personally walking it around, fix that. You are not the server, you're the source. Build distribution so the message moves without you. The thing most people miss is that widen your horizon isn't a mood, it's a checklist. Add instruments. Publish datasets with schemas, code with tests, decisions with rationale and timestamps. Add translators. Write summaries for non-experts, diagrams for visual thinkers, examples for practitioners, citations for skeptics. Add relays. Collaborators with ownership, institutions that adopt and rebroadcast, courses that canonize. Each addition lowers the cost for others to copy you faithfully, which raises the survival odds of your signal. Let me make this painfully concrete with 3 plays you can run. Play 1, encode the rule, not just the result. Don't hoard a clever fix in a DM. Write a 1-page guide that shows the why, the how, and the edge cases. Put it in a repo or a shared drive with version history. Ask one person to run it cold. Patch what fails. You just converted tacit knowledge into a pointer state the environment will keep repeating. Play 2, shift defaults so the right behavior is the cheapest behavior. If you care about accessibility, make the template accessible by default. If you care about safety, bake the checklist into the tool so it pops up exactly when people forget. You're not inspiring people, you're engineering redundancy to outvote chaos. Play 3, choose channels with half-life. Quick posts fade. Standards, open repositories, curricula, and public docs stick. If you want a value to survive turnover, attach it to a process with owners, audits, and incentives that keep copying it for their own reasons. Once you run those plays a few times, agency starts to feel different. You stop wrestling outcomes with private effort and start aligning the environment. You'll notice 2 things. First, your wins feel boring in the moment and huge in the rear view, because they kept paying rent without you. Second, the same rules that render galaxies start rendering your day. Decoherence is your friend. Each additional copy makes backsliding expensive. Here's a human past that matters more than the mechanics. Kindness is high redundancy. People repeat how you made them feel into stories and habits that outlast both of you. Credit given propagates. Fairness propagates. Calm under pressure propagates. If you want a moral to travel, put it in procedures people can run and retell without you standing there. That's not branding. That's error correction for values. Add 1 hour of broadcast to your week, not for posts, for encoding. Pick one tacit practice and turn it into a public artifact. A guide, a template, a lesson, a checklist. Include an example and an edge case. Write a 2-sentence why so future you remembers. Share it where the next person will actually find it and use it. Ask someone to run it and fix the rough edges. That hour repeated is how signals accumulate and horizons widen. Now the part that scares people, latency. Some loops are longer than your career. That's not tragic, it's how large systems answer. You won't see every echo. Ship the antenna anyway. Plant the tree whose shade you won't sit under. Mentor the person who will mentor 10 more. Put the safety rule in the standard you'll never personally audit. Meaning in a budgeted world isn't more intensity, it's more copies in better places for longer. Where do you aim this? Aim at amplifiers. If you care about safety, encode in building codes, clinical protocols, and deployment checklists. If you care about truth, invest in replication, open data, and public literacy. If you care about beauty, build archives, open licenses, and teaching pipelines. If you care about opportunity, put your time into scholarships, apprenticeships, and standards that lower the barrier to entry. These are redundancy engines. They broadcast without you. Avoid the trap that erases good work in silence, perfect then hoard. Ship smaller sooner with checksums, tests, examples, definitions. Let the environment be your redundancy engine. Usefulness is selection pressure. Good artifacts get copied, bad ones die quietly. Either outcome is progress. Tie it back to the review you'll get when write access fades. That interface will surface what propagated. The apology you wrote that repaired a family, the checklist that prevented harm, the standard that cut errors in half, the practice you taught until someone else could teach it. That's not a sermon. It's storage logic. The universe returns what many channels certify. 2 closing moves to run this week. 1. Widen one horizon. Subscribe to a dataset, join a working group, learn one feature of the tool everyone else uses, add one antenna that pulls more of reality into your wedge. 2. Maximize one signal. Encode one tacit thing into a public artifact and route it to a channel with half-life. That's it. Repeat next week. You don't need cosmic certainty to live well inside a compressed, redundant world. Treat latency as focus. Do what you can loop. Treat bandwidth as craft. Make it legible. Treat redundancy as ethics. Make it worth copying. Your signal is the part of you the universe can keep. Write it so it deserves to outlive you. You are going to die. Not in a slogan way, in a physics way. Your write access will end. The pen drops. And what remains is whatever you stabilized in other people, in artifacts, in habits, in matter. That's not a threat, it's orientation. Everything we just walked through, horizons as interfaces, decoherence as the vote counter, Landauer's bill, holographic bookkeeping, lands here. The universe keeps what you make copy. So make this personal. If the review is a redundancy-weighted readout, what shows up for you? Not the hours you white-knuckled alone. Not the clever thought you never shared. What surfaces are the choices that propagated? The repair you made, the shortcut you documented, the safety you taught, the credit you gave, the harm you owned. That's what physics calls durable. That's what people call a life. This is why it's urgent. You don't control the horizon. You don't bargain with latency. You don't outrun entropy. But today, while your rights still land, you can choose what becomes easy for the world to keep. That turns meaning from a mood into a method. Design your echoes on purpose. Take one breath and look at your week. Name one apology you owe, one practice you can teach, one fix you can encode where it will be copied faithfully without you standing there. Put it in a channel with a half-life, a standard, a repo, a checklist, a lesson. Ask one person to run it cold. Patch what fails. You just moved a private amplitude into the public ledger. If this hit you in the chest, it's because the stakes are real. You don't get more time, you get more copies. Live like a signal engineer, latency as focus, bandwidth as craft, redundancy as ethics. Write what you want returned at the end. Subscribe if you want more of this, physics that cashes out in agency. Watch next the Dark Energy Horizon Deep Dive, then our Black Hole Information feature on page curves and islands. And in the comments, name the one practice you'll encode this week so it survives you. Not later. Now, the ledger is patient. Your pen is.